sort of surprised me that Anders Mahler was actually looking at the video recordings of our FoodOn meetings and had comments to make about the milk stuff. It would be nice to kind of put a wrap or progress on that issue too today, but I thought the prime priority one is the one that helps Anusha out with her USDA work, actually. So let's get into it. So just for the record, Thursday, November 24th, FoodOn curation meeting, and I can welcome Kai on board every 2 weeks, perhaps, depending on how the how the scheduling works out for you. Kai, you've already introduced yourselves to our team. Magali, have you met Kai before? Have you? No? Okay. Well, Kai, you could just say a few lines about how you're working with USDA and us.
Yeah. Hi, Magali. I think we might have interacted regarding CDNO. Perhaps. Maybe I'm mistaken. Sorry, I think you're muted. If you're trying to say something.
Yes,
okay.
Okay. Nice to meet you. Yes, I think we have already discussed, but
yeah, we discussed
already.
Right. Yeah, but anyway, so nice to meet you in person. Salut, bonjour. Yeah, so I'll be working for USDA and in collaboration with FoodOn. There's some political things like USDA can't officially be telling USDA FoodOn what to. It's complicated. Well, there's always like things, but I will wear two hats. I'm unofficially or officially, unofficially, whatever you want to say, a postdoc for Dr. Will's lab as well. So if I need to like actually work on FoodOn, I'll just pretend I'm an SFU postdoc. If, to get salary so that I can live, I will be a USDA postdoc and I will make things happen. So I've previously worked on various oboe foundry ontologies, including CDNO, ENVO, other things. And so I'm happy to join here. And I've worked very briefly on FoodOn, but I'm happy to do a lot more with it. And so for USDA, some of the basic things, Anusha, maybe you and I can collaborate, because basically a lot of it sounds like you're doing very similar things to what USDA needs. And, I'm happy to help facilitate that process and, do what we can to make sure that FoodOn is able to cover lots of use cases for, things like USDA. I don't want to say just USDA, but, that's a big obvious use case. And it sounds like FoodOn is already on board doing that. Sorry, I'm kind of juggling my various roles.
That would be extremely helpful. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
right. We had been using Hyundai as our main liaison, but that will now switch to being Kai. And of course, we are in touch with Kyle a fair bit with our own meetings dedicated to USDA stuff, probably going forward once every 2 months, I think the tentative schedule is. Okay, so obviously there's tons of things to support, to seek to support FDC, Food Data Central project with, and that includes describing qualities of foods and synchronizing FoodOn to support that. And that's like making sure we've got definitions in FoodOn for raw food, fresh food, dried food, and having those break down and possibly change amongst the food groups. So with that said, let's switch to the topic of the day, which is animals and their parts, which we hadn't really done a formal model of. We just sort of made some tentative moves in the past, and that's causing confusion as we go through and try to systematize the USDA list of meats that have been tested in SR Legacy as single ingredient food, single source food. So I don't know, Anusha, do you want to lead off a game where we sort of...
Yeah, sure. Maybe I should share my screen so we can start from there.
Yeah, and I'm anticipating it's like Bill talk about the hierarchy, and then let's use that duck example as the focus.
Yeah, just to give Magli and Kai a bit of background, because we already had a meeting yesterday with Riyadh and Ahmad, and we got some very useful suggestions. And so accordingly, I've tried to tweak the model a bit. So mainly we are going to discuss about animal food product pattern in FoodOn, and would definitely really appreciate your suggestions and feedback on that. So this is a part of USDA's SR Legacy FoodOn mapping project, and on which Damien and I are working from last couple of months, from last few months, in fact. There are more than 1,300 sample categories which we got from USDA, which needs to be mapped to FoodOn. And all of the samples consist mainly of raw foods. Some of part of the mapping has already been achieved by this plant in a plant product terms, where the sorry, the point of discussion today is that I'm sorry. So this is like the plant food product pattern, which we discussed, that this is how we have actually followed for plant, where we had whole or parts, and then we had underneath plant part whole, and where this whole is equal to any of the plant or animal part, and in taxon with whatever the taxonomy is. The relation was then changed to from drives from to in taxon, and then we have underneath plant whole raw and then plant whole, which is the example is like hydroponic lettuce being one example. This is, I think, Damien mentioned here. And then we can have plant food product, which could be anything other than the parts, which is like plant syrup.
And I'll just interject that the reason has to be such a delicate hierarchy is that, like, is this whole Mariology, the proper part of a plant in as an organism versus a reference to the whole thing, and whether it's been changed in any way. So a plant that you yank out of the ground and leave the roots in the ground isn't whole anymore. So it's kind of easier to deal with plants because almost always you're dealing with a part of a plant, not the whole thing. It's very rarely that any plant is sold with its roots still hanging on in the grocery store. But hydroponic lettuce happens to be one example where, in fact, you're getting the whole thing, roots and all. Live lettuce, they call it in the stores. So, but most
would
of the
carrots,
time,
would rooted carrots not count as whole then, or would they count as whole?
yeah. But what is that? I haven't even seen that or heard of that.
Well, no, like sorry, carrot tops, like those are.
Oh,
That's true. That's not the whole carrot, though. I guess like some of the root structure is missing, but the top is part of it.
yeah, right. Technically, yeah.
So I guess that's not the whole carrot either, perhaps. Although,
Right.
is it? I don't know. They have a deeper root structure than just the carrots we eat.
Yeah, because I think they have like capillary roots, almost like finer roots that get torn off in the harvesting process usually. Yeah.
Right.
So that would be part of it, would still be part, I guess.
Yeah. Now there's
Yeah.
just tangentially, and this does affect our curation modeling. Uberon, and just to recap in a sentence, Uberon, Chris Mongal of Uberon, and Lindsay Thomas, I think. No, Ramona Walls of Plant Ontology discussed parthood, and it turns out that the plant ontology allows one to talk about seeds and parts of a plant without referencing that it's part of a whole organism, whereas Uberon does not. It has quite the reverse take. Therefore, the AI searching through these things and running into a carrot root reference will doesn't assume that the top is still connected in the plant ontology world. Whereas if you run into a liver, it is assumed that's still connected to the rest of the organism in the Uberon way. We have to navigate that at some point when we take the AI machine parsing of this stuff really seriously. And at the moment, we don't have an answer out of Uberon about how best to reference a heart without it being still assumed to be connected to the rest of the body. There's floating around, tried to propose something like a butchered heart, a severed heart that would anatomically reference the heart without the logical consequence of the rest of the body connection. So
but
that,
is there no way to specify that it is after not harvesting, but after slaughtering?
after which? After
Slaughtering? After
butchery?
no, butchery, but butchery for me is a grocery where you
Yeah.
are
Yeah, slaughtering is what you say.
After
it is
slaughter.
slaughter. Sorry for my
Sure. Yes. So, but it just means so far in FoodOn, we've been referencing all of the anatomical parts directly. We're saying a cow heart is a heart and in taxon Symbostoris. That's the latest pattern we've had, but we may actually have to change that axiom to say butchered heart or severed heart and in taxon some.
Is it true that in Uberon it's always attached to or part of or connected to in some way? Is that an axiom that like heart is always going to entail?
Yes. Oh, according to Chris Mongal, and the only exception are some body products like milk and blood, which are not quite proper parthoods.
Because it is, I guess it is assumed that the organism is living.
In Uberon.
Uberon, I don't know if they say it's living. It could have just been whacked through the head.
I guess that the assumption maybe in Uberon is that it's an intact organism.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And so our tentative first move in FoodOn around that was to talk about chicken whole. And then at the moment underneath that, we've got chicken carcass, which means a dead chicken. And then we've got butchered chicken, which is not just dead, but feathered, cleaned. And,
but
gutted.
I think we have to link with the process steps. You don't have steps in I could we have to link with the processed food, because a carcass is a processed chicken.
Yes. And that's a little bit of an error on our part in a way when we list chicken whole and then have under it butchered chicken, which is eviscerated, so it's not whole anymore. So this is really the pattern that the background to what.
But that was the case in Langual, because there was some categories specifying with bone, without bone, for example, or with whether no. So it was listing all the different states of processing something, depending of the product, because when it is an animal, it is the offal are removed, the offal part, and the edible part. Offal are edible, but I mean, then we have to distinguish between the different parts.
Yes.
So
that's what we have to create formalize our pattern for now, and then pump it up onto the FoodOn website so everybody understands. So
finally, you have to specify that it is a separate wall part, or I don't know, or you. How do you
like some
intend
sort of
to how will you distinguish from Uberon?
Could we do like derives from some
Derives
Uberon
from,
part
yes.
or something like that?
Yeah. We still want in FoodOn a term called heart, like animal heart, chicken heart, beef heart, but we will have to say derives from some heart, probably.
So just like for milk.
And for milk, did you say?
It is the same proposal you made for milk.
Yeah.
Because we have the discussion about what is milk. Is it a mammalian?
Now in RO, there is a relation produced by. So for milks, you can probably do better than derives from. You can say produced by. And that's.
Yes, but I mean, our last discussion was about milk as a I don't remember. You say milk derives from a milk product derives from milk, and milk was defined as a fluid, an anatomical fluid.
Right. Uberon's anatomical or body product.
Body product, yes.
Yeah.
So it was derived from.
Right. So the derives from, I think there makes sense for any kind of processed milk. Anything that's been changed in food production. But the thing about derives from that's been such a problem in the past, and then as soon as I say this, we'll hand it back to Anusha. So, thing about derives from is the RO relation says an entity X or Y derives from X when X ceases to exist and Y is brought into existence. Now, from an ontological perspective, if the identity of X has changed, if there's some axiom that's no longer true about X, then it is indeed no longer in existence. And so
like the heart being part of the rest of the body, for example,
right,
if one is butchered.
Right. So the body is no longer by definition whole. It therefore does cease to exist, even though in our common parlance, the rest of the cow is still there. It, from an ontological perspective, is no longer a whole cow. So therefore you can use that derives from there.
Right.
But you can't say an apple derives from an apple tree so well, because the apple tree is still its whole self, sort of, after the whole thing, after the plucking of the apple. Yes, it's true, the apple tree that had that apple, that entity no longer exists. It's now minus that apple. But that really like confronts our more common sense identity thing.
Is it like a produced by or some other relationship that either
That's
exists?
what I was veering off to, using the produced by relation. Yeah.
Because also the apple tree is not the same all the year long. It is
Exactly.
sometimes with apple and sometimes.
I know, all the
without
flowers
apple.
coming and going, the apples coming and going,
Yes.
the leaves coming and going. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So can we move ahead?
Yep.
Would that be
Please.
okay? Okay,
Or
great.
Anusha.
Thank you. Yeah, no worries. That's all right. Okay, so as I just show you the plant part pattern, so similar like that, because I have achieved most of the USDA's mapping after curating that plant part, but now the main thing is the rest of the most of the terms are related to animal meat products. And so for that, I think that we have created this prototype model, and for where we have animal whole or parts, and then we have these classes underneath. So the idea was that to how much granularity FoodOn should go to create these terms.
And so at the moment we've got the animal whole entity, and so cow whole, sheep whole. We would mint those terms to be separate from NCBI taxon for those things, just to say that these are animals in a food role. And so one tiny question is whether we should be actually adding food animal or to the name animal there, to recognize that we're talking about an animal in a food role in FoodOn, as opposed to CBI taxonomy.
Why don't we use raw commodity, for example?
Yeah, we would be saying animal whole is animal and in role some food role. That would be the one axiom. And then for specific animals, we would be saying, I'm proposing that, for like duck whole, that's the only place in the hierarchy that will actually mention the taxon, and that all other references to parts of duck and so on will say derives from duck whole. And that way we can control the taxon links and just have inference somehow draw out for any particular animal part what taxon it is.
Yeah, and so maybe so one of my question was just to confirm that we have here duck whole or parts, and underneath we have duck meat single cut or parts. So how should we differentiate between two? I mean, should we just have organs under single cut or parts?
Does the word meat encompass organs? I know tissue does. Animal tissue encompasses organs and meat.
Yes.
So should we be saying duck tissue and then list all the organs and the meat cuts underneath it? If we say tissue though, and we have meat with bones in it, that doesn't quite cover it. So it may be that we're using this word meat colloquially, and we're just making sure we define it the meaning. And so that's why I was thinking our pattern would be animal meat, single cutter parts, and then in the definition you would say meat or organs and possibly bone tissue, and then leave it to the subclasses to rule out the presence of tissue or bone or cartilage.
Yeah, I think we're accidentally, and I realized that's kind of yesterday, making meat synonymous with muscle meat, whereas meat is not restricted to muscle. It is animal flesh.
Yes,
so it can include
yes, and I think it is the same in the Food-X too. We have to distinguish between meat. We have to define meat as the muscle part, because tissue is too large, because there are also fat tissue, which is not meat. So,
right.
But you are right. Meat can be with or without bone.
So do we even skip reference to the word meat there, and we say duck single cut or parts, or duck part or parts? Because a single cut was meant to reference a whole portion of some kind, but it's only the subclasses that would ever define what the single cut is. So it's really part or parts, I suppose, because we want to be able to, with the term, it's sort of like steak. If I go for, well, duck is a wrong creature for steak, but anyway, yeah.
maybe duck.
But I think you have to take into account if it is a single cut. I don't exactly know what it is, but it is the primary cut, and then you have by half, by quarter.
Okay.
So
primary
you have
cut.
Yes.
Okay.
Primary cut would be better for me.
Okay.
Does that
but
include...
then won't it be very difficult to differentiate between what are the subprimal cuts and then primal cuts? Because then we have two different, because then subprimal cuts, I don't know, would that be a subclass of that?
Well, each country even has its own butchery for defining where these cuts lie, but one can still name the concept. So, but does a primary cut include like a whole leg or a heart? Or are you already down lower at like sirloin primary cut or something? Do you know, Magali?
But what I know is that we have to distinguish between mammal and duck, for example, or any birds, because you have not the same anatomy, and so you have not the same cut.
Right. So avian, land animal, and fish will certainly be suddenly defining different cuts. But
yes, but I don't say that the cuts are everywhere the same. But what I am saying is that if it is a duck, you will not cut it the same way as a cow, for example, because of the anatomy of the animal.
There, and even varying by country or continent too.
Yes, and also by countries. You are right.
Right. Okay, so we've got this duck holder parts, and then
Mhm.
underneath that, we wanted to talk about organs for sure,
Yes.
and then meat, which can include tissue. So I guess the first question is whether we want to have underneath duck holder parts. Oh, right. Now I'm remembering. Hi, Emma. I'm remembering the one other dimension that this whole thing has to handle is a reference to duck that's meant to be general. Like we don't have any more information. We don't know whether they're meant referencing the whole animal or the part of an animal. So that's why the term duck holder parts exists, to provide that, allow for that ambiguity. Now we have the same problem down at the duck steak level. We don't know whether the person was referencing the whole cut or just some part of the steak that was sampled, say. So that's why we needed an animal single cut reference to show that we're talking about the whole cut and not some little portion of it, to be clear there, to at least have that. There, yes, the duck liver gives an example of that, where we want to say we definitely want the word duck liver whole in there, because that's what people are buying in the store or expecting to buy on mail order or whatever. And then there's the ambiguity of whether it's maybe parts of duck. So it may be that we'll have an animal hierarchy with all of these variations, but then we might only populate these particular birds and so on with some of the language. Like duck, the only duck that I know of in the store is either whole barbecued or chopped up. It's not like, and duck breasts. There's not a whole lot of attention paid to all of the other kinds of things. So we wouldn't take the whole animal hierarchy and have a duck term for every instance of all of the variations on the animal side. That's number one move.
Not populate every single possible case, basically.
Right. Not pre-compose a term for, but if people wanted to, they would have the animal hierarchy, listing animal heart, animal liver whole.
And we could have the cuts in the animal one too, right? Like, so we don't have all these pre-composed different cuts,
Right.
unless it is super, super specific to an organism, and then we could do a pre-composed term.
Right, an organism or a continent or Argentinian steak versus, yeah. So
Yes.
So now what, in terms of decision points, so I'm sure we have to have duck holder parts as a general term. And then in terms of, and to generalize that, it's animal holder parts, and then it's animal organ holder parts, or animal tissue, meat in the general sense, with tissue, without bone, whatever, holder parts. And then animal organ whole. Sounds like, Magali, we need to have an animal primal cut.
I don't know if it is yes, I agree. We have to have the whole animal, the whole organism, the whole organ.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if we need meat, because I think meat is only when you have cut sufficiently to have a steak, for example. I don't know, because meat, it's too general, it's too generic. You don't see the form.
Yeah, so there is one user that we do need to satisfy, and that's why we're bringing some of these generic things in.
Yes.
It's the food composition analyst, or the food outbreak investigator. They may not know what they're looking at, so they need to name something much more generally than we would ever see in the store.
Yes, but in that case, I think that meat is like a synonym of muscle.
Yeah, animal
Muscle.
Muscle tissue.
Muscle, sorry, muscle.
Okay.
I can see how that might be the case there, but in a lot of places it's not that specific. Like that would be a more specific version of meat, because you could have organ meat, you could have connective tissue. Like meat is, in a lot of cases, at least with like looking up at different like sources, a lot of people consider meat basically, some people just consider it the edible parts of an animal. So it can be much more general. So I would just hesitate on immediately making it that narrow, and be more specific and say muscle meat when we're talking about muscle meat. But that's also part of my, I guess, like hesitancy of getting too specific, I guess, even with the term meat, unless it's specifically needed, because it is so general and seems to vary a lot. But
I totally agree with that.
Go ahead.
I think that's no, totally. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I think that synonyms for, like, you could have like a weaker synonym meat, like for the colloquial sense, but I agree, like for a more general high level term, maybe it's not as precise. Is that what you're saying, Rhiannon?
yeah.
So Anusha, could we
Yeah.
start a new, or is that slide 2 a generic animal one? I think it is, right?
Oh, yes.
Can we start editing this to
Yes.
make sure it's covering everything what we're talking about here? So we've got animal whole or parts. And then for the definition of animal meat, let's see, do we need to say single cut?
So what exactly is the single cut supposed to
Right.
be? It's like you've done something, like you might have cut it one or more times. Is that what this is supposed to mean?
It means a butchery cut that is common in whatever country or wherever the meat was made. So if somebody sells me a steak, it's a single cut that's would be considered a steak on its own, rather than a chopped up steak, say.
Yeah, like I just sent a link and it kind of shows, has a visual that illustrates some cases, at least in a case of beef, where you might have the hip cut that could be broken down into a round cut that could be further broken down into an inside round, outside round, eye of round.
Yes. Yes, we already have, we are trying to cover that in the beef section as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so that.
So the single cut in our definition, we could say is a primal, subprimal, or secondary cut. So should we need to have an animal underneath animal whole or parts? We need another term there. Animal single cut. And then the definition for that will be that very page you just sent us to: a primal, subprimal, or secondary cut.
Right.
And it wouldn't include things like ground beef. And it probably wouldn't include things like steak, stewing beef, chopped up in cubed beef.
Yeah, I think it might not be that specific. Like stewing beef could be sourced, or ground beef could be sourced from multiple different cuts. So we wouldn't want to tie it to a specific cut. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so now we've got animal single cut. So now animal meat single cut or parts does encompass primal cuts, which are big, but that's okay. We meant it to. And then underneath that, you would have animal liver, whole or parts, and animal liver whole, and animal liver whole or parts would have the synonym animal liver, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But should we have animal organ before liver, heart?
Yeah, that's right. We want a generic organ. We're not sure if it's a heart or a liver or kidney that we're looking at in the formaldehyde or whatever. So yes, another item there.
Organ, whole or parts, would that sound be okay?
That would be the
animal. Well, should we put animal organ or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Like that?
Yes, and it could be
Okay.
whole or part.
Yeah,
It could also be whole or part
parts. Yeah.
of parts.
Okay, then animal liver. Right.
And then the question is if somebody doesn't know that it's parts, then they can reference the animal liver whole or parts. If they're trying to be specific about an animal liver, then they would reference animal liver whole. And then we would have one term for animal liver part, but we would probably never surface that term in the actual meats listed in FoodOn. It would just be there for people if they ever wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
It's same like animal heart parts. It is possible you can buy chopped liver in the store already chopped up. I've seen that.
Yep.
Okay, so one more term, Anusha, is animal liver parts.
Okay, it should go here.
And that would cover everything under the sun for and then we just wouldn't percolate these down into all.
And just one question: when it regarding ground meat or chopped meat, would you consider that as parts or subparts? It is not the parts.
I think that would be animal meat. So underneath animal meat, let's add the term animal meat. Oh, right.
Parts. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not good enough because then that's a steak or that's a part. So we actually have to introduce the process term there to explain what it's the output of. So we would have to say, and this actually brings up another issue, which was there was should we be merging minced and ground meat in FoodOn, or should we be keeping them separate? Minced, I'm always thinking about,
because I don't know if mince and ground is a synonym for.
I don't think it is.
Is it the same or not?
They're different techniques. Like mince is like to cut finely, and ground is like through some sort of machine that
yes, I
is
think
different
so.
processing.
Yes. So I think we need two terms there.
Right, I will correct that because I remember that when GRDI requested terms, then they wanted to have ground or minced as a single term. So we discussed to have that at that time. But
so
I think that we had a discussion with Emma as well, and she was of a favor to have a single term, which is ground or minced. But yeah, it makes sense to maybe have two different terms, ground and minced.
Yeah. So add those underneath there. I'm pretty sure we do need to have the two terms.
Okay, right. So
that will be clear for me. But what about specifying the means to shop? Just like Kay said before, when it is ground, it is with a machine, and when it is minced, it is with a.
Yes. So we have to actually add the definitions there. So we will add the axiom. So Anusha, we'll just, you can put.
Minced is with a knife, and ground is with a machine.
Blade. Minced with a blade.
With a blade, yes.
And ground with a grinder.
I think we also need to be careful about what the definition of meat here is, as we discussed before. We should probably hit that at some point.
Yeah, because like if we're doing the broad version where it can contain anything that's edible, then that could technically include bones. So I was putting that example here because sometimes people do grind with bones or connective tissue in there. One, to either make use of the connective tissue, or in some case with animal feed, they'll intentionally put bone in there.
Or really low quality hot dogs.
Right. So actually there's another term we need. One more, Anusha.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious. And that is animal meat deboned. And FoodOn already has that, but we need that.
Yeah, for the.
Yes, actually. but it is a pity when if in animal ground. You mean Ryan, and you mean animal ground or minced, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay. and, and sometimes
And-
it can be ground with bone, you mean?
Right. So
Yeah.
far we're allowing those two things, but I guess it's so common that we need one more term at least under animal meat ground, a subclass animal meat ground deboned, or deboned, comma, ground actually.
So animal meat
Deboned.
deboned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The
There's a-
process order is hinted at.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, is this an alphabetical thing,
Hmm.
or how do we apply the ordering of?
I've always done the bracketed expression trying to hint at the order in which the processes were applied.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
So
And
debone should be bracketed too?
Yes, I think it is debone hyphen
debone.
debone. It should be also into
In the
brackets.
brackets?
In
Yeah,
the brackets.
yeah.
Yes.
And this will include tuna and all the canned fishes and things like that, if they want.
Okay.
Except for a lot of
And
fishes will have the bones in them.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can,
Deboned,
but
deboned is
Partially
a,
deboned, partially.
it is
depends
the
on what the
skeletal.
deboning-
It is the skeletal part. Let's say.
Mhm.
it would depends on what the deboning process is, because it's like if we define deboning process as a process which is intended to remove bones, that doesn't mean that every bone has been removed.
Mhm.
So if we have something
Mhm.
general like that,
Mhm.
we might be okay with, it's like, okay, some were left over after the deboning process.
Mhm.
Yeah. That only some bones were removed does not mean all bones were removed. Yeah.
And one thing to
Food.
ask is that would this be a synonym of animal meat? Animal meat single cut or parts? Because if a sample says that they have suppose they have sampled duck meat or any animal meat, so would that come under? So does that mean that it's animal meat single cut or parts?
So I think we plunked in a little something under duck meat, which could just be moved up here around that definition to allow for bones and things, if that's your question.
Yeah.
Right. So if you go to the duck meat slide and just copy, did we meat or organs and possible tissues? If you could just copy that over to the, or move it over to the animal meat one.
So my question was that I'm a bit confused about like how should we place any meat, like suppose it was duck meat raw or with skin raw, or I mean
Yeah. Oh yeah. And add with skin, possibly with skin, because meat isn't skin.
yes.
And so I think the
So it goes
animal
for skin
hierarchy is what we would be putting all of these other things according to.
But it could follow like a subsumption pattern where it's like liver is, or like duck liver is like animal liver whole or part, whatever, and derived from, or whatever the relation is to like the NCBI taxon duck.
Mhm.
And then we'd let the reasoner kind of place that for us.
Mhm.
That's right. We haven't really
Yeah.
toyed with that, but the reasoner can, and in fact, in Protege, it will automatically do the simple subcategorization, such that we wouldn't even have to specify a parent for duck meat. Although I like to hard code one just for all of the querying that's happening out there without a reasoner.
And maybe I couldn't I'm not sure about one thing, or maybe I couldn't understand that can animal meat be a synonym of this animal meat single cut of parts?
Animal meat would be a synonym for animal meat. Oh, animal
Single
meat
cut of
whole
parts.
parts. Yes.
Yeah, it could have like a narrower synonym or a broad, well,
But won't that
as
I mean, so we have animal liver as an exact synonym of animal liver whole or parts. So can we go for that pattern for this one? Like, can we have animal meat as an exact synonym of animal meat single cut of parts?
I wouldn't have it as exact, maybe
Mm-hmm.
like narrower
Okay.
or broader. I don't know, Damien, what do you think? Or would you think exact?
Well, can you put it in there right now, Anusha?
Yeah, sure.
So we had done a big discussion about this before, and the idea was somebody says animal meat to us, and they're not
Yes.
more specific than what is the most appropriate class to point them to. And I think it's true that animal meat wouldn't be any more specific than this class.
But I think one thing that would need to be decided is if an animal organ is considered animal meat.
Right.
So
Right.
if we need to get more specific and have organ meat, muscle meat.
Yes.
Oh, I don't mind doing that. Magali, you mentioned offal, which is any of the organs of the animal. Is that right?
Yes, but I think also that it is the you have the edible offal and the non-edible offal.
Okay.
I don't know if it is the simplest way, but organ meat and versus muscle meat should be okay, I think,
Mhm.
because anyway, a muscle is not a muscle is a tissue. It is not an organ.
Mhm. Can you, Anisha, right now it
Yeah.
says meat or organs and possible tissues. So can you say meat or organs or muscle tissue?
Yes.
But we also have to be able to add may include bones and cartilage.
And may include bones and or
And
some fat.
May include bones, fat, cartilage,
okay.
blood. What else? How
And
long a
skin.
list?
And skin.
Yeah.
Bones, cartilage, ligaments, and skin. I learned so much.
Right.
I learned so much in English words.
Now the thing about
I'm learning.
the open world logic is that it's only by adding axioms that we actually block off any of those things. So we could just leave it unsaid and just have specific subcategories block out what isn't in them.
One thing that I think might be beneficial to saying organ meats and synonymous with offal or offal meats or variety meats is skin is an organ.
Oh, right.
Yeah. 'Cause
And
we have to,
yet we tend to exclude it from meat.
Okay.
we should be looking at the Uberon organ anatomy, and skin is one of them. So we can use that to inform our
Right.
Yeah, our
debate.
definitions. Yeah, we
Okay.
kind of really need to make sure we clearly define every word we're using in this hierarchy. Yeah,
Mhm.
now that that's about.
What is an organ? What is a tissue?
And what is an
And Uberon,
Ah, right.
and Uberon has that defined. So when
Mhm.
we're importing from them, we get that as a backbone.
Okay. So actually, I want to add animal skin there too, Anusha.
Yeah.
And now it's weird to say animal bone under animal meat, but we do have to have a place for animal bone.
Again, it depends on the definition of meat.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
but
think we need to define meat. We'd like write out our definition of meat before this
I
makes
think
sense.
we need to, and we might need like, it might be one of those terms where we need to have some more specific ones that people can then match with terms, because it does seem like in certain parts of the world, skin would be a meat, and then other places it wouldn't be. Or say some people only consider meat muscle versus other places that would consider an organ. Yeah, I feel like meat is technically kind of like a parallel conversation that hugely influences this.
Yeah,
Because if we're
okay.
having meat be a focal point in this hierarchy, then we need to define exactly what we mean by it so we know what to subsume under it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like with the plant, the non-animal milk product of being like, okay, well, what is milk? Well, what is dairy? Okay, well, what is butterfat? Like, yeah.
Okay, so now
That's
so something else is coming to me. There's no reason to put single cut right under animal meat. I mean, as in the name, just animal meat itself is a part I don't
Right.
even need to say single cutter parts.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's probably better to avoid parentheses things when you can.
Yeah, because we'll only reference
Okay.
single cut if we have to in a particular animal.
Okay, then I can add the animal meat row as well.
And what this invites is that we could say, instead of animal meat, we can just say animal part. We still need the term animal meat, but the parent class could be animal part.
I think it will be better because animal meat and then you have animal fat, animal skin. It's just it's
Yeah.
not so. Animal part will be more generic.
Yeah. And we could make it
And that could-
synonymous with animal tissue, like we talked about
Yes.
before.
And then organ could fall under that
An
too.
organ. Yes.
Right. So now,
Tissue or organ.
Yeah.
so now we can have a subclass. Boy, we're keeping Anusha busy.
Yeah,
We only got
that's
7
great.
more minutes. So
No, this is so great.
underneath the animal part,
Okay, right.
animal part singular is make that a singular part.
Yeah.
Underneath that will be animal organ.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so what's the latest? Do we allow animal tissue as?
You've got organ already.
Okay.
Yeah, we have got animal organ whole or parts already. Yeah.
Okay,
So just
so
move
that
the
gets
bullet.
indented
Just
entirely.
indent it. Yeah.
I think we can have animal organ because liver or heart are organ actually, and then we can have animal tissue, and you can have as a tissue you can have fat. Skin, you say it is an organ or a tissue? I don't know. You can have fat and bones. Bones are tissues. We have to check that in
I'm gonna
Uberon.
check Uberon right now.
Yes, but I think that bones are tissues. But
Yeah.
Let's see what Uberon says.
Hierarchy to be under animal part.
What? Sorry.
Can you indent the animal organ hierarchy to be underneath animal part?
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, and then we have animal whole. And then animal. Yeah, I think that looks okay.
All right, I took a little issue, I guess, with this yesterday. And if there is with animal carcass, I guess I don't always assume animal carcass is whole. Is that
It
just
isn't.
because we have it under animal whole?
Yeah. So take the word whole out of animal, butchered.
Mm-hmm.
That should just read animal butchered.
Should it be animal butchered?
Oh, sorry, no. I was looking at the line item below it.
Oh, okay.
That one stays whole.
Yeah.
At the bottom line, animal whole butchered.
And when we mention live animal, I couldn't understand what does that mean?
It means that the animal is live as opposed to dead, whereas the animal
Mhm.
carcass is definitely dead.
Okay, right.
But that last line should read animal butchered, no whole.
Yep.
But I still like.
Okay.
But we're assuming that an animal a dead animal is always a whole animal in this case.
Right.
So
So maybe,
so a live animal is safe to assume is usually whole, although an animal could be missing a limb. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're putting a hierarchy that shouldn't exist with animal carcass being under animal whole.
right.
Sibling
Maybe
classes.
carcass.
Yeah, because like when you buy a chicken carcass, for example, it's not the whole animal of the chicken. It's often missing the neck, the gizzard, the whatever. Sometimes they give it back to you, but oftentimes it's not.
Or even if someone deheads it, they would still probably call that a carcass, even though it's now missing the head.
You're right. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I meant for the animal butchered to capture.
But I'm just saying we can have animal carcass not be
not
whole, and then they could be if it is whole, that's fine. But if it isn't whole, we can still use animal carcass.
right. Okay, so we need animal carcass to go up a level. And then animal whole can
like
just have live or dead under it.
yes. Okay.
And then I guess my last question would be, should we be having an animal muscle tissue class to put all the animal meats under?
I don't think we should put the meats under it, but I do think having a muscle class makes sense.
Mhm.
Because I think that's, until we are all in agreement on what meat means, we can't say that all meat is muscle when there are other versions of meat.
Okay, so just one more class there, animal muscle tissue, which
So
just
where should it go?
flat with animal meat under above animal meat ground, I think.
Animal muscle tissue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then probably just an animal meat class under which all those animal meats would go.
So okay.
So yeah, like FoodOn has multicellular anatomical structure, which has subclasses like organ
Mm-hmm.
or organ part.
Yeah, we'll have to coax a number of those things in. A number of them were brought
tissue.
well.
So like, yeah, tissue or organ part are all subclass to multicellular anatomical structure in Uberon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of mirroring. I think we should try to mirror that maybe, because they put a lot of work into Uberon. So
Right. So multicellular anatomical structure is sounds like animal part.
right, exactly.
Okay. So it may be that we don't have to reinvent that term. On the other hand, this stuff, we're using this with reference to its food role, or it's mostly it's processed, something's processed. So we can't actually reuse the Uberon term right there.
Right. But I'm not saying we have to use the Uberon term here in the hierarchy, but what I'm saying is we should look at their structure to inform ours.
Okay, yeah. And we can certainly say derives from.
Yeah, and we might exactly want to create some relationship between that hierarchy with these.
Yes, because you have the anatomical system and then you have the organ. Ligament.
Okay.
Muscle.
So before we close, can I also ask one question I was confused about? So maybe it would be good to have your suggestion for that. So when we say veal or any of the, like when we talk about the stages of meat, like beef and veal and squab and pigeon, so should those be the sibling classes or should those be subclasses? Pigeon and squab and same as veal and beef. Because right now under beef product we have veal food product, but if we see technically, then beef is obviously meat from cow, and veal is which comes from veal, which is like some days old or so.
Yeah, so beef, it's a good question. So we definitely have veal. We need a name for a 1-year-old or less cow. That's what veal's coming from. But veal as a meat product is coming from that kind of a cow, but it would still fit under a beef product because the beef category is referencing sort of taxonomy and butchery, I think.
Like FoodOn is not necessarily referencing the cow, which is 1-year-old. We're talking about the meat that came from a cow, which is 1-year-old.
Right. So the axiom could be enhanced to talk about what it derives from. A veal calf, I think. So that's why we would need a name for a 1-year-old or less calf. So
which like that doesn't really exist within Obo yet. Things like that we're still kind of working on.
Yeah, at the moment, I'll confess, Kai, that FoodOn has underneath NCBI taxon has things like female chicken or female
Yeah.
cow.
No, it makes sense, like for FoodOn to do it, and then in the future that can put somewhere else if Obo gets its act together. Totally.
Okay, this has been great progress.
Yeah.
Anisha, I'll help if I
Yeah.
need some.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. But it's just like I'm just thinking like I have a ton of work to do now.
Well,
So no, it's
Yeah.
good. You
fill
got
in
more
all the
people.
blanks for all the meats, but we'll definitely want to make this hierarchy in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can
Okay.
even make patterns to like help flush. Once we have something like this flushed out, we can make patterns to like cross this with other things if needed. There's lots of things we can do. And because USDA has interest in doing this, I might be able to spend some good time helping you with this. So
That would be great, because right now we have started with the report sheet. I'll share that with you, and it has the section of all animals which we are trying to cover for USDA. It's bison, cow, beef,
no, I'm
and
familiar.
everything.
I helped build
Yeah.
that at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay.
You did
Great.
more of the work. I just helped you start. So now I'm back and I can help you finish it. So
That would be so great. Thank you so much.
yeah, no worries. I mean, it's my new job. So
Okay, I'm off and away. So see ya.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Bye. So thank you again. Bye, Magali. Bye. Bye.
And good luck.
Yeah.
With the
Thank
work.
you.
yeah, Nisha,
Yeah, definitely.
we can talk more later.
I'm just
Yeah, sure, please.
just no, it's just winding up right now. Bye.